Morning. See everybody. This morning, I wanted to investigate a little bit something that came to mind. Actually, maybe a couple things. This notion of customary ways of doing things is a topic I kind of landed on for today's talk. And then also a phrase that came up in a reading that I was looking at last week. A phrase, just a short 2-sentence phrase, "have to," came up in the context of Zen teaching, the Zen teaching I was looking at. So I thought that was kind of a interesting set of words there. You know, what does that mean in terms of what Zen teaching is presenting? Have to, have to do something, basically. But I'll start out the talk with that first aspect of looking at the customary ways that we do different things. And I'm thinking about this in absolutely the most broad way you can imagine. So the ways that we just move around in the world, kind of make sense of the world, all the different decisions that we come across. Is there any kind of commonality, common way that we approach these different things that come up in our life? Again, just across the board, all kinds of different things. And I think it's worth maybe just examining that a little bit, but definitely not in a judgmental way, a way of just taking a look at, what's our mode of operation often. So, and you can kind of think of any type of scenario here, but along those lines, you just think about something that happens to us. It could be absolutely anything. And in kind of reflecting on that, coming up with the talk here, for me, a few different components are part of what happens when something happens. And what happens is we identify something. Again, it could be anything. We'll have an idea about something, and then depending on what that is, we'll have kind of an objective that kind of comes into view. Either we'll see it as something that we like, we'll maybe want more of it, or it's something that's something of dissatisfaction, and we'll try to move away from that. So it's this kind of seeing, making, framing something up basically to some degree. And then, just very naturally, we have a certain reaction to many things. And from there, again, this is very normal. This kind of just how we work within the world is we'll come up with some sort of plan, depending on whether we like it or we don't. Some kind of outcome that we want to happen. Again, it could be anything. It could be burnt popcorn. What do we do in that situation? Or it could be something more serious in our life. And generally, I think it's kind of seen, a lot of these things are seen as outside factors. So there's something going on in the world outside me, and then I'm addressing those things. But it can kind of be something that we feel that we're addressing something about ourselves or our internal feeling. But either way, I think there's this sense of, getting an idea of what it is, and then just having a general view of how we want to move forward. And I think in this case, this term "have to" sort of comes into the picture too. Because I think when we identify something and then we are trying to make sense of it and maybe coming up with an idea of how to move forward, there, I think, necessarily has to be, I have to do a certain thing in order to maybe change what's happening, make it more in line with what I want it to be rather than how it is. So there's this kind of have to going on. Have to's come up in a lot of different ways, but at least that's just one way that I was thinking about how that comes up for us. And I'll contrast that a little bit again with this have to that I read in this Zen excerpt that I read recently. So in this customary way of doing things, I think a question can come up for us, particularly in studying Zen, the Buddha Dharma. Is there something missing at all in this customary way that we do things? And I think if we rewind back to the something happening, I think we can see potentially there is something missing a lot of the times in our life for the mode of operation that we're going through. And what is missing is exceedingly simple. It's something that we hear brought up in Zen teachings continually, basically. And that is just to be present with what's happening. Very simple instruction, just to actually pay attention to not necessarily labeling or having commentary on this identification, the preferences that come up, but actually just being very present with this customary way that we navigate the world. And I think one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this is I think maybe it's somewhat common to think of this as an either or type of situation. So in other words, we'll maybe see Zen as teaching us to be present all the time. And that's different than the usual kind of everyday operation that we're with. So it's either one or the other. But I would say what I'm suggesting here, the paying attention, the being present is actually just right in the midst of the different kind of usual operation, the customary ways that are happening. So it's not to judge ourselves for the way we kind of navigate the world, but actually just bringing a presence to that. So anywhere here we can come back to what's happening. So in the end, this, the identification of something or kind of framing something up, as I say, that's perfectly fine. Or a preference that comes up about something, I would say that that's perfectly fine too. But really, what I'm suggesting here is just that the presence is really the key of what the teachings are trying to point us to. And I think within that, there's also the wisdom of kindness really built into this as well. So it's not about trying to shove things aside or think that or make any strong type of assessment about how we're reacting to the world or whether we think we're confused or anything along those lines, but just to have that kind presence in any type of activity that's going on in our life. And in doing so, I think the have to that is a part of the process, as in I have to do this to achieve a certain type of outcome, that can transform into something else. And as I said, I'll kind of get to that a little bit closer to the end of the talk. I thought I'd also bring up another, I don't know, attribute or quality to our usual way of seeing things. And that is that right with this identification and the preferences and so forth, there's a real strong distinction of an outside world. So that really comes with the usual way of framing things up and having ideas and so forth. There's this entire outside world, and then that kind of gives us the contrast to compare it to maybe how we're feeling. So there's this delineation going on. And again, it's not a matter of judging that, but just seeing how that comes up and noticing that dynamic, that separation that happens, because I think it's quite helpful. Again, not to judge how we may be viewing things, but to just naturally allow those really strong dividing lines to actually soften a bit. And I think that softening can happen just through attention itself, just by kind of caring for this moment as we live it moment by moment. So with a strong distinction of inside and outside, I know at least in my experience, I'll kind of then, from my just general customary way, I'll look at outside factors as either being the culprit or the solution, or something to change out there, basically, is often, I think, where things can go for what we think has to happen or the type of outcome that we're looking for. Changing those externals or changing those people or changing the situation in some way. There's a section in a book that I read by Leo Tolstoy, a book, or actually kind of a novella, a short story called Father Sergius. And there was a passage in there that I thought was an interesting illustration of how quickly we can look to the outside for the culprit. And in this case, it was somewhat new priest, Father Sergius, who was in, I think, kind of a monastic setting. It was sort of a church monastic setting. And the abbot of that church was, as the story kind of goes along, he's shown as sort of an opportunist type of person who's not particularly sincere about the practice. And Father Sergius is becoming more like, it's kind of eating at him a little bit, and eventually there's a bit of an interaction. So Father Sergius asks for a transfer from a church official, and then the church official's reply was he thought that the essential issue for Father Sergius was pride, which was probably not what he was expecting. But at the same time, he did grant the transfer. So I think he wasn't saying that the abbot was completely not at fault. Maybe he probably already knew about the issues. But for me, the story was, it was kind of shocking to see that, and I could kind of see some truth there, or maybe how I tend to react to things and not notice what's going on in my own mind, which I think can be quite helpful. There's many, that section that reminded me of the book Crooked Cucumber, where it's a story of Suzuki Roshi, a pretty prominent Zen teacher, and his life story. And he's got some situations in his life where I thought I would have reacted pretty strongly, but he kind of saw that as an opportunity for him to practice rather than to try to focus on who may have been causing him problems or who else was at fault. He seemed to always really treat that as his own practice and to watch his own mind, which is pretty incredible to see that, inspiring to see that or read about it. So in the Tolstoy story, there's this kind of recognition that pride may be a part of it. And I think we're kind of in a danger zone there when we start identifying things, then we'll maybe judge ourselves or have this system of different tenets where we hear that some things are good and some things are bad. We'll kind of get into the weeds in that way. So what I'm talking about here is not about identifying things about what we think our persona is and then trying to correct them. I mean, there's very practical and helpful things where we can, things we can do to try to improve ourselves and be more kind and compassionate. But the main aspect of what I'm talking about here is just keeping it extremely simple in that just to be watchful of this life that's happening, our life that's happening. That's what the Buddha Dharma really focuses on. And arguably that is kind of the function in which, maybe we can make corrective actions for our behavior just out of seeing and but not judging ourselves, not judging others. And as we become more familiar with something that may have not really registered too much, and that is this strong distinction of inside and outside. Just with a soft attention towards that, I think then it's possible that we can see that this quality of inside and outside, we can really begin to see the idea nature of what that is. So we have a strong, generally speaking, I think it's a pretty strong idea of inside, outside, different, what we think the world is, the material world. But the more we can just quietly be present with our life and actually just really pay close attention to experience as it is, then, as I say, you can see an idea quality of this inside-outside point of view that actually, with direct experience, is there anything absolute about insides and outsides? You think of like a bubble rising up in the ocean. And we think of the bubble as a specific thing. But how is it different than the ocean? It's air trapped in the ocean. So the more we can just see experience, we can see that the ideas that we have about this and that, permanent things, whatever idea we have, that'll actually become less compelling than just experience itself. And as I say, you can see actually ideas, sort of the true nature of what our ideas actually are, that they don't explain reality in an absolute way. I think that also is linked to having a sense of what actually is more compelling in our life. So you think about the customary ways that we do things and how much a kind of magnetic quality that has, especially when things are a bit more heated in our life. And we're really drawn to that. We're really drawn to having the idea and changing somebody else. But I think this quality of attention to our life, then you start to feel that, what is actually more compelling in my life? My ideas about other people, do I actually want to control other people? Is that something that I really want? I don't think it probably is. It may seem like it, especially in the heated moments. But in comparison to really responding to our life, to really having a real attention to each moment and the vibrancy of what our life is, then very naturally that can actually become quite compelling for us in its completely real, it's the truth of its reality will become compelling of its own for us. When I think about the customary ways and what we are identifying as what we want, changing things that may be different than what we, we'll find something that we don't want and we'll want to change it. I think about what is really at the core of those impulses. Again, just everyday activities. You can think of a mundane preference or annoyance or anything. What is at the core of that sort of agitation? And I think if we really kind of get down to the bottom of it, is that we really want to know what peace of mind is. And I think of like even the situation of anger coming up. For me, if I look really closely at that, I think that is a cry for peace, even out of, an intense emotion. Really, what is at the core of that is we want to know what peace of mind is, this stability of mind. So in that respect, it kind of puts our usual plan a bit more into focus. Is that exactly what we are looking for? Or do we think that that particular plan that's happening right in this moment actually going to lead to any type of lasting understanding or peace? And again, it may be something that needs to be done in that moment, but with the teaching of Buddhism, what we're always continually coming back to is trying to get to a core understanding of really what this predicament is. Being able to solve our daily problems, but really, we're talking about the broad spectrum here of our entire life, birth, death, all human situations. So our customary ways of solving problems are maybe helpful, but really to understand what we are really looking for, I think is quite helpful. So in looking at that, this model of identifying something and then just having a preference coming up and then doing something to kind of change it, I think in light of just, again, presence and awareness towards that, you can kind of see a certain autopilot type of quality that may be going on there. And right along with that, this autopilot type of quality to it, we can see that, how exactly would that lead to really stable peace of mind and a true understanding of what's going on. So I think it is possible to really deeply know our mind. So being present with what is happening, to really be attentive to our life. I think that seems to me to be more in line with actually understanding peace of mind, to really know what is going on, not to let these things fly over our head. But if there's strong emotions, instead of just jumping right to the reaction, we can be here, be present, and live this awareness right now, even though it may not be pleasant at the time, but to really take care of our life. And I think the Buddha even kind of said that it's not really related to the scenarios that come up in life. So we'll see those scenarios as being the source of our problems, kind of the outside world. But that's, again, framed in by the limited view of inside and outside. So we can see scenarios in our life as being very important in being need to resolve them. And I kind of go back to what I was mentioning before, that this may seem like kind of a either or thing, where we would either, just kind of achieve a perfect presence, or we're kind of lost in confusion or something like that. But I'm saying that we can actually bring presence to what seems like, however our life seems to be coming up. So it's not a matter of two choices. I would say that our customary ways don't necessarily have presence to them, but with presence, it includes our potential customary ways. And again, it's not to just judge our customary ways or solving problems in our life. So this type of teaching, I think, is a way to really allow all these to happen together and to bring presence, bring attention to them. I think another thing that comes up is, as part of kind of that dichotomy aspect of seeing it as either one or the other, we'll also potentially see the customary way of identifying and having preferences as being something bad or undesirable. I think there's maybe a certain type of insight that's coming up there. I think maybe we can sense that just framing the world in kind of our usual way is not actually going to lead to peace. But then we'll maybe put the extra level of judgment on there that we need to get rid of that, or that that's bad. And certainly if we, just have some idea of perfect attention and presence without the ability to use our usual ways of negotiating the world, making different assessments and distinctions, if we couldn't do those relative things, we wouldn't be able to do anything in life. So really, Zen, I think, is helping us to say, this is a practice for our life, to actually do this, be here for whatever it is that's happening, and continue to do life in the most kind and compassionate way that we can. Always remind ourselves of that. So it's a path that is sheds a little bit of light on how things can we can be a bit absent-minded in how we're just moving around in the world. I certainly see myself do that in a lot of different ways, but we can really come back and attend to this life. It's just a matter of reminding ourselves and remembering to come back to this moment. And I think sometimes this instruction or teaching of presence or attention or awareness can be a little bit vague, or will be in just a situation in life and not really know what that means, or we'll think about it, but then once we start thinking about it a little bit, it'll just have all kinds of, we'll come up with something like, what exactly is awareness to my life? What am I supposed to do? And I'd say it's understanding what that is is nothing more than, if you imagine yourself in a situation, and then right there, you notice that you're kind of checked out. I think it's no more complex than just noticing that. Just in noticing that, you're back already. So it's not about noticing you're checked out and then thinking, okay, what's awareness? And I need to do this and this. Just remember that there's a simplicity built into this practice, that right at that moment of noticing. So it's a heated argument, or we're seeing something in front of us that we dislike, or there's an annoyance or something like that. And just coming back, that's it. No commentary needed, no extra narration about, you could kind of think about how you're feeling, but that's different than what I'm suggesting here. Just here again. Just completely simple, coming back and actually doing what's right in front of us, keeping things simple, just doing one thing at a time, devoting ourselves completely to what's right in front of us. So Zen is to actually just know our life as we live it. So it's not, I think even think about Zazen, sitting meditation, seems pretty specific. And we'll maybe even think about sit on the cushion, but then we do other things too. But I think like a teacher, Katagiri Roshi, here I'll quote a little bit, I don't think he would present things like that. He wouldn't say Zazen and then other things. He would say, from my understanding, is he would say the spirit of Zazen just being alive in our life, regardless of what we think we're doing, whether we're formally sitting in meditation or other things. Zazen is this spirit of wholeheartedness, of completely dedicating ourselves to whatever we're doing and leaving judgment aside. Not using Buddhism either as kind of a way of explaining why we do things, or anything complex like that. Just coming back to this and really setting aside the notions that we have about awareness and just being here in this moment. So I think attending to what's going on in our mind is this freedom of mind, or getting a glimmer of what this peace of mind is. And Katagiri Roshi, he is a Japanese-born Zen teacher who helped bring Zen to Minneapolis in the 70s. And this quote here is from the book, let's see, it's Returning to Silence. And he says, silence, I should say silence here, I think we could say that that's related to understanding this peace of mind, this stability of mind. He says, silence means you have to be as you really are. If you really want to know the real spiritual life, we have to taste ourselves as we really are. So we get this term "have to" coming up again. And the phrase, be who you really are, for me, that ties very closely to right amidst our customary ways of doing things, just having this, being present, just being present in that. Then I think we can see, have an idea, not an idea, but a feeling of what's actually happening here. And I think, to me, that's similar to what Katagiri is saying, to know who we really are, to be kind with ourselves, to be kind with others. This presence, I think, is a gentle practice where we can just be here and respond as best that we can. He goes on a little bit later in the book. He uses the term have to again. Here he says, and he's using the term simplicity here. So I think it's kind of related to the simplicity that we've been talking about a little bit. He says, simplicity is manifested only when our life, our circumstances are very clear. When our life is clear, it is a great opportunity for us to manifest simplicity and tranquility in our life. Excuse me. It's very difficult to manifest simplicity and tranquility in our complex world. Living in this complex world, how can we manifest or understand simplicity? This is a difficult matter for us, but we have to do it because it is our original nature. So every day we try to practice in order to submit to tranquility and simplicity in life. We do Zazen. Simplicity is Zazen, or sitting meditation. So again, going back to that aspect of we talked about earlier, the customary ways of having ideas about what's happening and having, to whatever varying degree, a sense of, I kind of have to do this, according to the idea that I have come up with to, try to guide things in a certain way or make it more according to how I want it to be. That's one type of have to. But are our ideas really telling us what's happening? Is this what really is happening? I mean, the more we pay attention to that, I think we see the more that our ideas are actually limited. They're very useful and pragmatic for us to do things, but Katagiri here is talking about getting to the very basis of understanding truly what life is. We have to do this, even though it's a difficult matter, we have to do this because it's our original nature. And what is our original nature? What do you find at any moment of your life? We find this complete, direct awareness, this continuous here now experience. So I think Katagiri is pointing us back to that. Our true nature is to recognize what is true and real, this experience awareness as it is, and coming back to that and living out of that, being the awareness that we are. So it's that have to flavor is a little different for me. When I read the passage here, I thought of all the different types of have tos or shoulds that I kind of do to myself or other people. And a couple of weeks ago, there was, we have these gutters on our, the place that we're staying, like the gutters on the roof, but it's got this little lid on the top to keep the leaves from coming in. And one day there's kind of this scurrying around up in that gutter. I wasn't sure if it was a chipmunk or what it was, but I think I kind of figured out it's a bird in there. So it's a bird hopping around. It couldn't get out because the leaf guard was trapping it in. So I went up there and I sort of bent up a couple areas, and then it was down a way. So I kind of guided it in that direction just by tapping on the gutter, and then away it flew. And I think this have to that Katagiri is talking about is kind of like, if you're a bird, you have to fly. So it's, or if you're a fish, you have to swim. So it's more along those lines than kind of like an idea that we need to carry out in order to, you know, fulfill an idea that we've come up with. It's more natural feeling to me, have to understand our original nature, have to do it because it is our original nature, as Katagiri says. So just in conclusion, it's I think that's one reason why you hear the term resume or remember a lot in Zen. So that's really the simplicity of the practice, is just remembering that indeed this is the true experience right here, right now, nothing more to say about it. And just to resume what this is, to be what this is in this moment, and to actually take care of our life, to really dedicate ourselves to what we feel is important, you know, the different things in the world that need addressing. But, you know, we'll just need to do that in the way that we, you know, are thinking about things, but really bring as much attention and mindfulness to that as possible. Otherwise, we tend up getting into a lot of different problems. But ultimately, I think this practice can really help us see what this true nature is, to really see the limits of our ideas, and in doing so, help really set down what's often a pretty strong inclination to really grip onto ideas and go after the usual ways of doing things. That's pretty much all I have for the talk today. I don't know if any thoughts or questions have come up in response to the different ideas here, but. All right, yeah, thanks.
My question is with regard to the have to. I understand what you said about birds have to fly and fish have to swim. It also occurred to me that in freeing the bird from its trap in the gutter or in the whatever it was trapped in on the roof, there was a have to in that, in the sense of practicing wisdom and compassion. I felt like you had to, and so you responded to that by freeing the bird. And I'm wondering if I'm off the beat, off track with that, or what your impression is of that.
Yeah, I suppose in some ways. Maybe not in that one, it was so easy to do, but maybe there's other things in my life where I could just easily disregard something. And I think normally when that happens, I always track it down to, I don't want to, you know, I have something better to do, or it's easier, or I can, you know, all the different things that are pretty strongly rooted in this framework of inside and outside and selfish, you know, self-orientation and so forth. But to see things, or to give ourselves the opportunity to just slow down a little bit and quiet the mind, then I think the self-orientated ways of doing things just are not as appealing potentially. So yeah, I think there's examples for everybody kind of like that, where you
Right. But not but, and or whatever, I don't know. There's a sense of have to in that, would you say?
oh, yeah, let's see.
To be true to who you truly are. There's
Sure.
a have to about that.
Yeah. It's easier to see in the natural world, because the human world, it's kind of like we so easily put the little caveats, but yeah. Ultimately speaking, the awakened mind would be operating completely out of have to, because it is our original nature. And I would presume a lot of the turbulent type of things we would normally do would fall off the table with an awakened mind. That's just not interesting or compelling, or it's just like you can clearly, an awakened mind would see that as not fun to do. Yeah. Thanks. Anything else? Anything from Zoom? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.